He didn't have to come in and say, hey, hey, woman, I'm the man of the house. No, just do what you're supposed to do. And I think a lot of times with our self-confidence, if we do what we're supposed to do, we know what we ought to do or what we've been trained or prepared to do, I think we're going to be successful. And then as far as the self-confidence of individuals, you got to be confident just in what you walk in. And I think that's going to help a lot. To me, that will help a lot of people, because I think all of us in this group, I don't think nobody walks around and say, yep, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to be a role model. You just do what you got to do to be successful.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. Before we get into this week's episode, we ended our last episode about interracial relationships, and we asked you to share your thoughts with us regarding the topic. And here's some of the feedback that we received. Stephen from Atlanta said, the fact that we still have to have this conversation in 2024 speaks to the progress or lack thereof made in this country. Liz from Illinois stated, I am cool with it as long as they love each other. We had an anonymous writer who said, I don't care, do what you do, but at times I realize that maybe I have trauma because I struggle with the idea of my kids dating interracially. Cynthia from Oakland said, love is love is love is love. If you check all the boxes regarding your internal makeup, the color of your skin is irrelevant to me. And lastly, we have Tony from New York who said, if they love each other, then rock out. I prefer one of color, but if I run across a really dope European, I'm in. So we appreciate all of your comments and we hope that you keep them coming. On today's episode, our topic is self-confidence and self-esteem, exploring ways to build and maintain both in a healthy way. And we're gonna have Brother Ray kick us off.
All right, appreciate you, bro. Yeah, the first thing I did, I focused more on the self-confidence portion of the topic, and I went to Webster's just so I could get their definition, and it's defined as the confidence in oneself and in one's powers and abilities. And first thing I did was I thought about, myself, like when I played basketball, whether it was in high school, college, or even, at the base level. And, whether I was the best person or the best player on the court or not, I had to have that belief that I was the best player on the court, even though I may not have been. And I felt like every time I took a shot, that ball was going in the basket. I had to believe in my own abilities because I wanted to make sure that I felt like I belonged. I didn't want to be on the, as we used to call it, the scrub court. I'm going to go and play with people that I thought were just as good or better than me because I wanted to prove that I was just as good as they were. And that was my goal. Moving forward, I thought about, the first enlisted symposium that I attended. I think it was in Reno. It might have been in Houston. And, I was selected to narrate 2 or 3 sessions. I got to tell you the truth. I was nervous as hell when it was time to go and step up on that stage, because here it is. I'm surrounded by not only my peers, but general officers and, dignitaries from all over the country that were there. And I wanted to make sure that I projected that confidence. And not only that, I had those expectations of myself that I needed to exceed. And I also knew I was a reflection of my brothers, and the one thing that I did not want to do was disappoint y'all. And I can step forward even further, when we would have our recruiting and retention workshops. and I was running the award ceremonies and emceeing. My goal was to have y'all tell me, bro, you handled your business, because again, I was a reflection on y'all. It was about me doing a good job, but I also wanted to make sure that I didn't want anybody walking up to Kevin and say, "Hey, man, what's going on with your dude? Why he was all up there stumbling all over his words and messing everything up? What was going on?" That was the last thing I wanted to hear, because again, I was a reflection on y'all, and I wanted to make sure that I felt like I belonged, and I want everybody else to have that confidence in me. And again, there's a whole lot more that we can go into, and I'm sure we will.
Start, man. When
So
I think
with that,
about, self-confidence, that's the trust in your abilities, and the self-esteem is the confidence in your abilities, which very similar, but very important. And, I think about, for me personally, I think about on both ends what built my self-esteem and my self-confidence, and the things that didn't. Funny story, but I remember in elementary, I wanted to be in the school choir, and I kept not getting picked, but I'd go up there and sing my heart out. Like, I was singing, at least I thought, right? And I kept not getting picked. But the thing about it is back then, dudes didn't want to be in the school choir, so there was always a spot where I was able to get on. And so I get in the choir and I sing. And one day I was singing with one of my classmates, and we was working on a song, and I'm just bellowing out my notes. And she said, "Ooh, child, you can't sing." Listen, I did not want to sing in public under any circumstances ever again after that. For years. And then I started working with a vocal coach, and basically she said everybody has the ability to sing in some sort of capacity. They just have to learn how to use their voice as an instrument. And it was like, if you would have really worked on it at that age, you could have probably been a really accomplished singer. And I've seen that, in lots of people that I know, that they just worked on their gift, but it just kind of depends on the messaging. So on the negative side, that was something I didn't have confidence or esteem in. But I think about, as a little boy, I heard a song by Chaka Khan and Rufus, "Pack Your Bags." And in the beginning, she says, you got to go. The universe is calling you. You're a chosen one. And I was like, why is this song just really speaking to me? And my mom said, when you were a little boy, I used to play that over your carriage all the time, and I'd sing to you, and I say, the universe is calling you. You're a chosen one. And I was like, man, if I think about it, man, my mom used to tell me, I don't care what kind of crazy ideas I would come up with. My mom would be like, yeah, you could do that. You could do it. And she always believed. And I think a lot of my success and a lot of seeing a life, like I think about the life I live now, I didn't imagine this, but I can always remember, no matter what it was, I always had a voice. So that self-confidence and that self-esteem, I think I told those stories because I think it's important that self-confidence and self-esteem is something that is owned by self. And at times you have to create it from self. But in the parameters of community, self-confidence and self-esteem is something that should be properly and healthily built by your community and your village. And so, I think that's a big, important part of what we do here as a group, is that we want to be able to give each other, give young men, young people, anybody listening that may be feeling down on themselves, the self-confidence and the self-esteem to move forward in such an unsure world by transmitting and transferring our belief and our confidence and esteem to them.
Perfect segue too for me, because that's my origin story, I guess, with regards to self-confidence and self-esteem is community and family. And I think about, well, first of all, I think about growing up in the hood. If you don't have self-confidence, you better fake it, because otherwise you might not have lunch money. So until you can build some up, you better act like you do. But I think for me, it started early, and it was a lot of what you said, John. Like my family, and my friends and my church family, man, I had four uncles and my aunt and my mom and my grandmother, and then again all my church family. Like the way that we all spoke to each other, right? The way we all had each other's backs. There was never any. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but no one ever talked down to me. Everyone always told me that I could be who I wanted to be and do what I wanted to do. And so I was built up from as far back as I can remember. I mean, my mom, same thing. Mom used to sing to me and say certain things, and so it truly was. It takes a village, right? And so that was indeed my story for as far back as I can remember. And so I honestly can't remember ever a time not having at least a modicum of self confidence and self esteem. And in fact, I think it was more than that. It was more than a modicum because again, it was kind of built in. Now, I do think some of that is innate, right? Some people just have it in them, and then you can have it built up or you can have it beat out of you, right? And I was blessed. I was fortunate to have people around me, again, family and friends, that village, who built me up and made me believe that I could do anything I wanted to do and be whoever I wanted to be. And so, um, I know not everyone is that fortunate, and for some people, it's one of those things where it has to come with work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But I want to give Rod and B a chance to jump in as well. So.
So self-esteem, I look at as how I valued and perceived myself. And as Kev mentioned, growing up in the hood, uh, that could go one or two ways real quick. And as I thought about this and I looked back, I do recognize that at an early age, I was different than a lot of people in my environment. And it used to be that, I thought, well, maybe I don't have the level of confidence that I need. But as I started rolling through the Rolodex of how that developed, I recognized that it started with how I valued myself. And that led to choices that I made and choices I didn't make. And then over time, that then built up my self-confidence, uh, and for me, I will tell you that one of the things that kind of cemented it for me and really changed the trajectory of how I moved going forward was my grandmother, who I spent a great deal of time with as a young lad. And one day she told me, she said, I'm so proud of you. You can be president of the United States if you want to. And it was something about her voice, the tone, the look in her eye that I knew that she actually believed that I could do anything I wanted to do. And for me, that was kind of the jumping off point for me to say, you know what? If my grandmother believes that about me, then I'm good. And it really impacted how I moved from then going forward, and recognizing, what my mother always told me about education being your way to change your circumstances. So if you don't like the circumstances, go get educated, get some knowledge. Then you'll have the ability to change your circumstances.
Yeah.
And that just kind of, propelled me, in the schoolyard on the basketball court. No one could stop me other than myself. And so imagine going into a schoolyard in the hood virtually every day with that attitude or that belief in yourself. And there were a lot of hoopers in the neighborhood. But in my age group, yeah, there were none better than me. I believed it so that was my early start to, just developing, self-confidence and recognizing that for me it was built off of my self-esteem, you know, what I valued about myself and perceived about myself and what I wanted out of life, you know, and recognize that, you know, my confidence would help me get there. So I just wanted to start with that.
Yeah. Everything y'all been saying about the self-confidence. I think John made the point about the village. I don't think you can have self-confidence unless you got somebody pouring into you. And I think we all been very fortunate that somebody poured into us, either our parents, uncle, you know, all of us had an experience that triggered us moving into that self-confidence. Of some of us it was sports, some of us it was education, singing in the choir. It's all of us had some experience where somebody poured into us and said, you can be whatever you want to be, and you was off and running from there. And from that, you know, it could have been that one thing. Like for me, I think it was when I was 10 years old, I started playing football, and that was from football, it parlayed into school, and then it parlayed into being confident when you want to start driving. You know, my dad was like, oh no, before you learn how to drive a car, you're going to learn how to take care of a car. So guess what we used to do the old school? You change the oil, you knew how to, you know, measure the air in the tires. So that whole confidence just built from what you were taught at a young age. So I think, again, for us, and I think maybe what's lacking for some young people today, is that there's nobody that's pouring back into our young people at an early age to build that confidence so they can excel in life. And so, like I said, I think that was, for me, is having somebody at an early age. And I can revert back to, you know, my coach when I was 10. I can revert back to my parents. You know, I can go back to our neighborhood. You know, somebody always was like, well, I'm going to help you get better or help you go where you need to go along the way. So, but I agree with what everybody's saying tonight. Is somebody else poured into us, and that from that's how we where we are today. So
Saying, you know, and you know, Byron brings up a good point about someone pouring into you. You know, I think about all the young people that might not have that at an early age, right? You know, how do they develop a positive image of self when they're not necessarily in that environment where someone is actually building them up, encouraging them, you know? And so for me, I think, you know, part of, you know, mentoring and giving back to young men in the community is that thought that you never know who you're going to run across that might just need that word of encouragement or that strategy or that tool to kind of propel them into changing the course of their lives. So
Definitely good stuff. And I agree with everything that everyone has said here. And definitely when Byron talked about the village, um, one of the first people that came to my mind was my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Juanita Martin, um, my favorite teacher ever. Uh, she was one of those that encouraged me to do extremely well in school. Again, like I said, that was one of the areas where I was being bullied in because I was getting good grades. And because I was getting good grades, her husband would send me gifts through her, you know. So because I'm getting gifts from him for doing exceptionally well in classes or in my with my report card, I was being bullied because of that. And Mrs. Martin saw that, and she actually called my parents and had them come and talk to me. She talked to them in front of me, and because of that, my dad saw he really started watching me up close, and he just happened to watch me walking home one day from school, and I had my head down. I was by myself, um, and I just felt like I felt worthless, to be honest. And because of that, he and my mom put me into American Kempo karate. And because my dad said two things are going to happen here. One, you're going to learn how to defend yourself. I'm not telling you to ever to use this to other for anything other than to defend yourself, but you need to learn how to defend yourself, because the only way you're going to get a bully to stop bullying you is to punch him in the mouth. And he also said it was also going to help me with my self-esteem, because he did not like the fact that his son was walking with his head down, looking at the ground, and I was missing everything else that was going on around me. So that was one of the things I really appreciated. And the words that my dad said to me, um, he always told me he believed in me. My parents always told me they believed in me. But the one thing I'll never forget him saying is, son, if you don't believe in yourself, how in the hell can you expect anyone else to believe in you? And because of that, I kept that lesson with me. And I thank Mrs. Martin. She passed a few years back. Um, and that woman knew me when I walked in her. I would walk into her classroom as a grown man, and she knew exactly who I was. She might not be able to remember my name at that moment, but once I said it, she would tell the class about me. And she never. She was the first teacher that I can say that really loved me, like I was one of her own. And because of what she did by talking to my parents and pointing out to them what I was going through, that helped me, because my dad and my mom at that point decided, we're going to help you develop your self-esteem, and this is how we're going to go about doing it. So
I think this is a really good point for a pivot, because we talked about self-confidence and self-esteem being very similar, but I think when you look at both of those, there's kind of like they're obstacles. So if we look at self-esteem, and Ray opened us up with the definitions, but if we look at the self-esteem, the important part is the confidence in one's own worth. And I'll let me explain what I mean by that. So I can have confidence and self-confidence, and that's an ability to do things, right? So I trust in my abilities, I trust my qualities, I trust my judgment. So I can go and I can do a thing, and I can do a thing well. Let's use all of our leadership journeys as an example. We know that we can do the thing. We know that we can train and mentor others to do the thing. We know that we can advise the organization and hire level leaders on the thing. Like, we know that through and through, we are great leaders. And so that's our self-confidence. We walk into a leadership position, we walk into a leadership situation with that confidence. But then there's that self-esteem part, that one of the obstacles that I think happens is sometimes life will beat you down. Circumstances will happen. Sometimes you don't see the results that you feel that you should see in an organization. And although or a situation, an organization situation, whatever that might be, I want to make sure this is general for everybody, and you know that you are doing the thing, you're doing it well, that you're showing up, but not seeing that results, not getting that positive feedback loop, not having, things pan out the way you expect them to, or know that they should, based on the effort that you're putting in. And sometimes that can wear down on your self-esteem. And so while you'll have confidence in your ability to do a thing, you won't have that same confidence in your own worth. And I think that was something that Ray was kind of pointing towards. He knew that he was good at things, but sometimes he didn't understand his own worth. And I think for a lot of us, I was going to say for young people, but none of us are. Some of us might be relatively young, but we're not young. And I think that that's something that is important for us to understand, is that you can have a lot of confidence in your ability to do, but it's important to have confidence in your worth, because, personally, as a child of parental abandonment, I felt like I had to work to get approval, because, the question would be, if I was good, if I do this better, if I do that better, then maybe that'll make me worth something to somebody. So I became very good at doing a thing, confident at the things I could do, but it was the value. And I remember in therapy having a breakthrough, like, I was like, man, I'm done with my dad. But, I had one of my moments and the therapist led me and guided me through the moment. And I was like, hey, I'm a good man. I'm serving my country. I'm a good father. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. And my man still don't want me. I have my Will Smith moment, like no matter how much good I've done, it's still not worth it to him to have ever been a father to me. And so, you have to mend that. But, I just kind of wanted to speak to that. You can have self-confidence and still have struggles with your self-esteem and your own worth.
Yeah. And when you talk about that self-confidence, I found myself in a place where I had to learn where you don't stay where you tolerate it, but you go where you're appreciated. And a lot of times we stay in places that we're tolerated only because, we need the money or, we think that place is better for us. And so we stay places where we're tolerated and it impacts your self-esteem. And you got to understand that confidence that you have, you got to learn, let me go somewhere where my skill set, my self-esteem, who I am, what I bring to the table, not just tolerated, but it will be appreciated. And I think for most of us, well, I know for us in the military, there was a lot of things we tolerated. There was a lot of things we tolerated. But if it wasn't for that self-esteem, we would have been kicked out. We would have cussed somebody out. We would have had a dishonorable discharge. But because of that confidence that we had that was built up outside of where we were, that allowed us to maintain until we reached a goal of, okay, we out of here. Now let me really be someplace where I'm appreciated. And we got to find that balance of where people can say, okay, how long do I stay someplace where I'm not tolerated or where I am tolerated? And then where do I find that self-esteem, or where do I find that place where I am going to be appreciated and where I can now, because in a place where you're appreciated, guess what they're going to do? That's going to even help build your confidence and your self-esteem even more.
I equate self-confidence and self-esteem to kind of like having superpowers, right? When you have them, you're virtually unstoppable, able to accomplish just about anything you set your mind to. And it's easy, I think, well, at least easier to, kind of flex your self-confidence and self-esteem when things are going well, right? When you are accomplishing things, it's easy to kind of feel unstoppable. But I think when self-confidence and self-esteem really show up, is when failure occurs, right? And trust me, if you haven't had a failure in life, you will. It should live long enough. I promise you, you will. But where self-confidence and self-esteem shows up, I think, with failure is that it causes you to use that failure or those failures as fuel and motivation, right? Instead of kind of allowing it to stop you in your tracks. And I think I talked about flexing them, and I think I said that because I think self-confidence and self-esteem are really a lot like muscles, right? But just like muscles, they have to be built up. They have to be trained. They got to be put into practice. They have to be consistently used and repeated. And I think about when we talked about this topic, John put together these four really great questions, and two of them I kind of lumped together, right? The one was how did you develop your own self confidence and self esteem, and then there was one where it said how do you suggest young people build and maintain their own self confidence and self esteem. And for me, I lumped them together because what I did is what I would also suggest and recommend, right? And I think a lot of it is a mentality, it's a mindset. There's a saying, I don't even know where it came from. You all have probably heard it. Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And when I think about great minds discussing ideas, to me, that's about setting goals. It's about critically thinking through things, not just talking about people and events, and especially when it's in a negative or a gossipy way, but really critically thinking, and not only when you set your goals, but think about the concepts in those goals. And I don't want to get too deep here, but really kind of dissecting not only the goal, how you accomplish it, but how you think about it as well. because that's important, kind of that metacognition and thinking through how, you're going to get that goal accomplished, what you need to do. Do I need to get an education for this thing? Do I need to know the right people? Whatever it is. But I think by setting goals, critically thinking through them, achieving those goals, that helps to build your self confidence as well as your self esteem. Um, I also think that we often, unfortunately, we have a habit of kind of allowing um, one negative thing, right, or one negative moment ruin our entire day instead of focusing on that good thing or those good things that may have happened, or may be happening. And again, that comes with training, being able to really think about, okay, I cannot let this one bad thing just ruin my day, because again, that's something that can affect your self confidence, um, and your self esteem as well. So I'll talk about the other two questions in a bit, but I know.
When I looked at, and thanks again, John, for sending the question. As far as developing, self confidence and self esteem, uh, and Kev talked about your mind. And one of the things that I think I learned over time, that had I fully understood it when I was younger, there's literally no telling, no limit on where I could be in life now, because your brain, mind over matter is a real thing. So so the idea of daily affirmations,
Yes.
you'd be amazed at what that can do for your psyche and your belief in your ability to do a said thing, and we know that doing something and being consistent about it over time, it just continues to build upon your confidence and your belief. And I used to always tell Malik and Quentin that if you want to have any kind of life, then you need to get into the habit of stacking good choices and good decisions on top of one another every hour of the day, every day of the week, every week of the month. And that will become a stair step to where you ultimately will be in life. So, so I'm just a huge believer in your self-confidence or your confidence, and your esteem being something that you can build upon through consistent positive habits and good choices. And we all know if we can take back some of the choices we made and replace them with some different choices, but you just never know what that even does to your mindset at that stage in your life, or what direction that leads you in. But I'm glad to report, I'm glad to be here, living to have seen you brothers reverse course or any dark paths you might have been trying to go down and end up to this place here today, which is also a testament that, like Kev said, you will fail at something. If you're not failing at anything, you're not trying anything. So
Absolutely.
you will fail at something,
Yeah.
and it's in those moments and how you respond to adversity,
Yeah.
that determines a lot about the trajectory of where your life goes. So daily affirmations, is a really big deal. I used to just kind of blow it off as not, I mean, really? What's me, saying something positive every single morning gonna do for me?
And something that you just said too, Rod, talking about some of the decisions we made, that if we could, if we could take them back, we would. But that old saying that good decision making comes from experience, but where does experience come from? Bad
Bad
decisions.
decisions.
So it's just kind of,
Right.
that's the progression.
Yes,
That's the
sir.
progression. But one thing that I left out too, and I'll give it to whoever wants, but I also meant to I meant to mention gaining knowledge. I guess to a degree I did, but I think confidence, self-confidence, and competence are inextricably linked. They're tied together, right? It's a lot easier to have self-confidence in yourself when you know what you're talking about, right? When you know the direction that you're heading. And knowing what you're talking about, obviously you have to gain some knowledge in order to do that, whether that means getting a formal education, an informal education, researching things, whatever. Again, when you know what you're talking about and you know what you're doing, it's a lot easier to build up your self-confidence.
As you learn things and you get that knowledge, it also informs the belief system that you develop.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
So it all goes hand in hand. That's a great point. I just wanted to mention that.
I was expecting Ray to jump in, but I guess he ain't ready yet. But no,
I was ready.
those self affirmations and that positive talk. One of the things that I talk to people about are, one is the conversation you have with yourself, so vital and important. But then the way that they frame conversations, and it's a really simple thing that I notice and I point out with people. Like, you got people, and this isn't, if this is your thing, this is not, but it'll be an issue that you can handle. I hope it works out. How about you go make it work out? Like, why are you hoping that it'll work out when it's in your power to make it happen? And it's just a small tweak. It's just like when you approach life with, we used to do called communication skills training. And so we would teach people how to have positive conversations. And so one of the ways that we would allow it to hit home is we'd say, an action or an active verb is one where when we talk about this particular action, you can tell us. Like, we'd ask the group, if we ask you to wave, what does that look like? And they'll all do something to this extent. It may look a little different, but it's basically the same thing. Okay, so that's a wave. What would it look like if I told you to stand up? And everybody would stand up. And so then we say, so what does it look like when you hope? And that's something that's not gonna, people didn't even know how to make that look like anything. And the point that we were driving home is that is an undefined verb. It's passive. And when you move through life and through the situations with a passive mindset, you're kind of hoping that something or someone will come in and work it out for you. But if you move through with an active mindset and to get out and do it, you might not have to do it by yourself. But as long as you take those first steps, it's just like help will come in. So I think that's important. And one of the things that I would really say, just something I would throw in there, is whether it's a success or fail, find something and see it all the way through. Like if you decide to be a part of a course that's going to be 3 months, getting your tail kicked in month 1 and 2, see that thing all the way through. Or if you get on a fitness journey and you say, I got to work out for 3 months and I got to get to see it through, like whether you get the result or you don't. And that'll help develop your self-confidence, not because it always works out the way that you think it should work out, but you see that no matter how hard it gets, you don't quit. And I think a lot of times we quit on things and then we think, oh, I'll just restart. And we forget that while we might be able to like I could lie to Kevin and Rod and Ray and Byron, I could lie to y'all about what I did and what I didn't do, but I was there. So I know all the times that I quit. And if I keep quitting, my mind starts to, kind of normalize. Oh, every time he start doing this, he quit. So he gonna quit this time too. And we've got to start getting to a point where we keep our promises with ourselves, and then that'll build that self-confidence and that self-esteem, because now you're communicating to yourself, I am a finisher. I am one that can keep my appointments and keep my contracts and, keep my agreements. So that's something I think is important.
Yeah, thanks, John. And that was a lot of what I wanted to say. So, but there was one or two nuggets you left out for me. So I thank you. The one thing I would definitely like to encourage folks is, like, especially when it comes to self-confidence, self-esteem, you know, um, surround yourself with positivity. You know, surround yourself with like-minded folks. That's, again, and I know I've talked about this in previous episodes. I surrounded myself with you guys because you guys are positive. You guys are your role models. You're my role models, all four of you. And I can appreciate that. But if you surround yourself with positivity, then you're going to do something positive. And to John's point, if you surround yourself with negativity, you're going to constantly fall into that negative aspect of things. So the only other thing I could say is about this is, when you're trying to be successful in something, and again, I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes, talk to someone who is where you are trying to go. So again, if you were looking at going back to school, you talk to someone who has gone and you ask them what was the pros and cons. You get that information from them. If you're looking at becoming, if you're looking at going in for your doctor, if I was looking to go for my doctor, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call Kevin. I'm going to call Byron because they've already walked that walk. So let me talk to them and get some good feedback from them. So
You don't want no feedback from me on that, because I tell people, ask me all the time, how did you finish school? I was like, no, I wasn't that I was that smart. I was just too dumb to quit. you know, and that was, we're going back to what John was saying. You just got to get in your mind with your self confidence. Well, one, you got to have somebody that you got to believe in something other than yourself. For me, it's like, hey, you got to have that relationship with, have that relationship with God. You got to believe that when you feel like you can't do it, you got to have somebody or something that's going to pour into you. And then second, like John was saying, like Ray was saying, you got to get to the point where you're like, you know what, I can't quit. Find something that's going to drive you. If it's your family, if it's the generation that came before you, your children, you look at, it's something. Find something that's going to keep you moving forward. And sometimes that's all you need to get your self-confidence back. And like Ray was saying, surround yourself with other people that are like-minded, that are trying to go where you want to go, or read some books about people that have already been there. What did they do to be successful? But yeah, you definitely, I think for us for me with self-confidence, once I start, you want to believe in yourself. But like once you realize, if you try to be your own island, then you're destined to fail. You, with that self-confidence, you got to say, okay, who or what am I doing this for? What's my reason for me wanting to be better? What's my reason for want to achieve? And you got to use that as your goal, and you got to run with it. So, but yeah, that's.
I think that yeah, and Ray beat me to the punch. I was also going to mention about getting a mentor or a coach, and make sure that when you do that, you find someone who is, again, like Ray said, who is doing something that you want to be doing, right? Someone that you admire, someone who's at a place that you're trying to get to, right? It doesn't make sense to go out and get yourself a mentor who's in the same spot that you are, right? A mentor who is spewing negativity all the time. Like, you want that person to be, same thing with a coach, right? You want that person or those people to be people who are striving for greater, who are at a level that you want to reach, and they're still striving to get to another level as well. Um, that's so important. And something that both Ray and Byron said, and I don't want this to come across as contradictory to what they said, because that's not my intent. They both talked about surrounding yourselves with like-minded people, and I do think that's important to a great degree. But it's also important to get around some people who don't think like you, people who will cause you to challenge some things, whether that be belief systems or whatever the case is. Um, I think about when I was going through my, speaking of doctoral program, when I was getting my PhD and doing my dissertation, one of the things that's required is whatever your argument is, whatever you're saying a problem is, once you have kind of collected the data and analyzed the data, you also are supposed to be looking at the other side of it, right? You can't just look at, you need to be able to have an argument to refute whatever, if this person is saying something different. And in order to do that, in order to refute it, you need to be able to know exactly what that argument is. And I don't know that I'm getting my point across the way that I want to, but you need to be able to understand that other perspective. You may not agree with it, but you need to at least it needs to be something that's going to at least cause you to think, right? Critical thinking, I mentioned it earlier. You absolutely need to be able to think through situations. And maybe what this person's saying does not align with you, but listen to them, hear what they're saying, analyze it. If it doesn't work for you, chuck it, right? But I think those sorts of things also help you to gain knowledge, helps you to be able to look at things from a different angle, a different perspective, right? And it keeps you open-minded as well.
One of the one of the questions that that Brother John had sent that I don't know that we've addressed yet, but also I wanted to go back and address this whole idea of the obstacles that are purposely or sometimes inadvertently placed in your path along your journey that could impact your self-confidence or your self-esteem. I think back to the number of times I've heard adults tell kids that they were never going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
Now, if you're constantly told that, at some point, you're going to start believing that, right? Because someone who you trust or maybe who you hold in high esteem keeps telling you that you're not going to be anything. Like, wow, without realizing the damage or harm that they could be doing, So I would say, and I've seen, and I'm sure we all have in so many different scenarios, but especially as young people, those things being spewed. Now, for me, I grew up in an environment where you had to be kind of quick-witted, or you were always gonna be the brunt of the jokes. And it was recognizing that and realizing that, oh yeah, you always have to be on the ready for the comeback. And I think about,
Or you better be able to throw hands, one of the two.
oh yeah, for sure. For sure. And if you from where I'm from, you better be able to do both, really.
Right.
Just to make sure. And not that you can throw hands, but that you're willing to, right? That was the other part.
Right. Right.
It's one thing to think you can, but people have to believe that you're willing to,
Absolutely.
and they're not really wanting all that smoke that day. So
Yeah.
but I would say that anyone that has the opportunity to be engaged with young people should really pay attention to how you pour into them, whether intentional or unintentional, because you could have an influence on them that you don't even recognize. I have, young men, hitting me up pretty consistently, saying, "Hey, coach, you'll never know what you did for me when you said thus and so." I'm like, wow, you remember? Like, yeah, on those van trips when we would be heading to games, and you would be sharing knowledge with us, you know, I still remember that. You know, I remember you playing R&B music instead of rap music, you know, so we could broaden our minds and our thought processes, like, you know. And so I will tell you that, you know, my girlfriend really appreciated that as I got older and had an appreciation for music other than rap, you know. So you just never know how you'll impact people. And then for young people, just know that sometimes adults, they don't know any better. They don't know any better. As grandma used to say, baby, they don't know. They don't know no
Bless
better.
their heart.
Bless their heart, right? You know. Yeah, and so sometimes you have to recognize that. You're like, oh, you know what? I just made up in my mind that, yeah, I don't be nothing like you anyway. So whatever you say, it really don't even go in one ear and out the other. You know, there's a door shut on that side that you're talking to, and it's just reflecting back to you or deflecting back to you. So, but anyway, I just wanted to touch on that question because I thought that was a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of young people experience. You know, because you just never know who you're gonna come in contact with. You know, as a young age, it could be a babysitter. You know, it could be your uncle, your aunt that you know you've been left in their care, and you just never know how they're pouring into.
To something you said, Rod, a couple of minutes ago, and I know we were kind of joking around when you talked about, you know, it's one thing to have the ability to do it, but it's something totally different to actually do it. And it made me think about, and I think it's applicable to self confidence, um, because you know, self-confidence also is born out of action, out of taking action and doing things and then doing it consistently. And I think about the riddle that John Maxwell had some years back, and I loved it. It was and it seems simple, but I got the message about the five frogs sitting on a log, and four frogs decide to jump off. How many are left? Five. Why are there still five? Because there's a difference between deciding to jump off and actually doing it. And so, you know, and I think oftentimes we don't take action because we're afraid, right? We're afraid of making mistakes, we're afraid of failure. But again, going back to what we've been talking about, right? You have to fail. Failure and success are coupled together. People look at them as two separate things, but they go hand in hand. They are coupled together. They are again inextricably tied together, just like you know, confidence and confidence. So I wanted to throw that out there too.
Um, Hearing Rod, I know John had talked about it earlier, you know, about the roadblocks being put in front of you, whether it was advertently or inadvertently. Sometimes for the well, not sometimes, with the self-confidence and self-esteem, if you're trying to get where you're trying to go, sometimes you just have to say, I'm going to succeed in spite of you and in spite of what you're saying, and in spite of what you're thinking. So if that's what's going on in your world, I would say, yeah, you keep that positive mindset and say, I'm going to succeed in spite of.
All right.
And
I
that's
like what Rod was saying about how the young people was pouring into him, or how he was pouring into the young people, how he didn't even realize it. Like, you know, you're just being a role model. You're being who you are. You're just pouring into young people or other people around you. Not even, it's like, it's one thing to say that you're a role model, but then to actually just walk in it. I think you can make a lot of impact when you just walk in it. You don't have to walk around with a sign on your back, say, hey, I'm a role model. No, just do it. That was one thing my mom used to tell me about my dad. She was like, your dad never had to walk through the house talking about he was the man of the house. He just did what he's supposed to do as the man of the house. He didn't need to put a sign. He didn't have to come in and say, hey, you know, hey, woman, I'm the man of the house. No, just do what you're supposed to do. And I think a lot of times with our self-confidence, if we do what we're supposed to do, we know what we ought to do or what we've been trained or prepared to do. I think we're going to be successful. And then as far as the self-confidence of individuals, you got to be confident just in what you walk in. And I think that's going to help a lot. To me, that will help a lot of people, because I think all of us in this group, I don't think nobody walks around and say, yep, I'm gonna wake up today and I'm gonna be a role model. You just do what you got to do to be successful, and people see that in you.
Yeah, see Byron get the preacher hand. He was like, and the man of God. And no,
And the Lord said,
that's what I'm talking about, man. She said, your pops didn't have to say he was the man. He's about that action, boss. You gotta be about that action. People be having all these pretty words. You gotta be about that action. But I wanted to piggyback on something Ray said, man. Like, people will tell you spite ain't the best way to do it, but sometimes you got to use whatever you can to get through that short burst. Like, you know, I think about Shawshank Redemption. Andy Dufresne had to get through that creek full of the crap because freedom was on the other side. And if what's on the other side of what you got to go through is important enough to you, then you make it through. So that's the real point I want to get to, is that make sure you set goals and a vision for your life and something to look forward to that's worth it to you, because if it's not worth it to you, you're not going to get to it, man. It's a funny story that my grandfather used to tell, and I used to tell it, you know. But I tell a story like this. When I was young, we used to go out to the country, and there was this little girl that I liked, but she didn't never seem to pay me no attention. I don't know what it was. I mean, I took a shower on Saturday, whether I needed or not, you know, so I don't know why she wasn't paying me no attention. But, man, I don't know. And so, like, when we were out there in the country, we'd had them Coke bottles, man, that needed a bottle cap. And those guys, man, they were just with their teeth and like, ugh, I couldn't do it. I hated it. And so one day I was going down by the creek and I saw her standing there. And she looked up at me and she said, John? And I said, yes. She said, can you open my Coke bottle for me? And I looked at it and I said, I sure can, because I had the right motivation to do something that I normally wouldn't do. So I'm going to leave y'all with that. If you got the right motivation, you'll do all kinds of stuff you didn't know you could do. Get you some motivation.
Yeah. And so I just want to leave with also, advocating and supporting, the development of self-confidence, self-esteem for people, especially younger people. I would say always be yourself, because that's who you are. Don't try to be anybody else. Invest in yourself. Anything you think might be a shortcoming and it's important enough to you to become a strength, then you do the work to make it a strength. Recognize that you are responsible for your own self-happiness. And don't be looking to the left or the right for anybody else to do that for you. And always define success for your life, because ultimately that is what's going to generate your motivation to achieve that. Don't look at the Joneses. You define, what success would look like to you, and then you go pursue that thing. I just wanted to get that in before John pulled the plug.
that failure is part of success. Don't be afraid if you make a mistake. A lot of times people nowadays, we don't want to make a mistake because we don't want to look bad. Again, it goes back to, you got to do what Rob was just saying. You got to do what's good for you, because if you try to base your life on somebody else, you'll never be successful, because you're always trying to look and do what somebody else does. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the one thing they told us in recruiting school, as soon as we got done with recruiting school, was forget about what you learn in recruiting school and develop your own style. So in life, you got to develop your own style, and you can't be afraid. You can't quit. My own story in my PhD program, I had 2 classes where I actually failed those classes. Now, I failed those because it was during the time when my dad got sick, and I tried to pull out, and it was like, well, we can't, you can't withdraw now. You just got to take the F. So I could have been like, you know what, my father's sick. I got an F in school. I need to stop. But, again, self-esteem was like, let me regroup, get myself together, let me bury my father, and let me get back on this thing. So, we're going to have challenges in life. The question is how you're going to respond.
Yeah, I think for me, as far as wrapping up with any sort of advice, I think what Rod and Byron just put out there are perfect. The only thing that I would add really is to eliminate negative language. I think I kind of briefly talked about it earlier, how we allow negative things to influence our entire day instead of it just letting be what it is, a negative moment or a negative event. We don't have to let it become our entire day, because then it can grow into a week, a month, a year. You know what I mean? So let it be what it is. It was a bad moment. It was a bad event. It was a bad whatever, and let it stay there. And I'm saying that to myself as well, because as we sit up here and we talk about all of these things on each episode, yes, we have experience in these areas, but some of the stuff we're still working through ourselves, right? We are not perfect. We know the things, but it's not always, because again, we're not perfect. So we don't always utilize the tools in the moment, but we know that they're there, and we are working on ourselves just as we hope you're working on yourself as well. All right. Well, with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us as we wrap up this week's episode. I want to leave you with a quote from professional tennis player, author, and activist, the late great Arthur Ashe, who said, "One important key to success is self confidence. An important key to self confidence is preparation." Until next time, peace.